People only remember my sin. They call me Rahab the prostitute. The woman men visited in the night. The woman families avoided during the day. But nobody talks about the God who walked into my darkness and turned my shame into a doorway for salvation. Nobody talks about the night my house became the safest place in all of Jericho. The night two strangers arrived and everything changed. I was a broken woman in a broken city. Jericho was powerful, our walls were strong, and everyone believed we could never fall. But I felt it in the air. The fear, the trembling, the whispers about a coming God no one could stop. And on that night when the footsteps approached my door, I had no idea heaven was about to choose me. Let me take you back to where it began. Before my name was in any story, before people spoke of my courage or my faith, I was only known for one thing. I was Rahab, the woman men visited in the dark. The woman mothers used as a warning to their daughters. The woman fathers pretended not to know even though they knew my door well. My life did not begin with glory or honor. It began with shame. And Jericho made sure I never forgot it. Jericho was a powerful city. Our walls stood tall and strong. Soldiers guarded every gate. People boasted that no army could ever break us. Our towers touched the sky and our king believed he could never fall. But inside those walls there were people like me, broken, forgotten, unseen. My home was built high into the wall of the city. From my window I could see the roads where travelers passed. Caravans carrying spices, soldiers marching, merchants shouting prices. And sometimes when the night was too heavy, I would sit in the window and watch the moon rest on the stones. It was the only time I felt peace. I never dreamed of becoming a prostitute. No little girl grows up hoping for such a life. But life is cruel and hunger does not care about dreams. When my father died, my mother left, and my brothers were too young to help. I had two choices: starve or survive. So I survived. But every survival has a price. Every night left a mark. Every morning I woke up feeling smaller than before. Women avoided me, men used me, and children whispered my name like it was a curse. I learned to smile with painted lips and dead eyes. I learned to laugh when my heart was bleeding. I learned to live with insults because if I cried there was no one to wipe my tears. People passed by my house with their heads high and their hearts full of pride. But late at night when the lamps went out and the streets grew quiet, footsteps came to my door. Men who called me filthy during the day came trembling in the dark. Sin looks different when nobody is watching. So I was not blind. I saw the world more clearly than they thought. I listened to travelers. I watched soldiers. I heard whispers from distant lands. And the more stories I heard, the more I began to wonder if there was a God who saw women like me. Sometimes I would stand in my window before dawn and whisper into the wind, "God of anyone who can hear me, do you see me too?" No voice came back. No angel, no thunder, no sign. Just silence. But somehow, deep inside, I felt something was changing. The world outside Jericho was moving. Jericho was proud, but pride is loud, and loud hearts shake easily. Travelers came breathless with stories. They spoke of a strange God unlike ours. A God who split the Red Sea. A God who destroyed mighty armies. A God whose people walked through the desert, undefeated, unstoppable, carried by something greater than spears or walls. At first I thought they were stories made to scare children. But then more travelers came. Merchants from the south. Soldiers from distant towns. Even our own guards returned with pale faces and trembling hands. Israel was coming. Not just men. Not just soldiers. A nation. A people with miracles behind them and heaven above them. Fear crawled into Jericho like a shadow. The king called meetings. Priests prayed louder. Men sharpened spears. Women hurried in the streets. But no one said it out loud. Our walls were strong, but they could not stop a God. And I did not know that this God would soon walk into my doorway. I did not know that heaven had chosen the most unlikely woman in the whole city. A woman the world had thrown away. A woman people used and mocked. A woman who believed her life was already over. But sometimes, God stands at the edge of a broken life and whispers, "You are still mine." I remember one night when Jericho's lanterns were dim and the streets were silent. I stood at my window looking at the stars. The city was heavy with fear. The air felt thick like something powerful was coming. I wrapped my arms around myself and whispered into the dark. Whoever this God is, I hope he sees me. My voice sounded small, but my heart thundered. Because for the first time in my life I was not asking for money or protection or food. I was asking for grace. Days passed. Nights passed. Whispers grew louder. Israel was near. Our king sent guards to watch the roads. People locked their doors early. Even the rich began to tremble. And everything changed. Two men, dusty from travel, eyes sharp like they had seen heaven and hell, walked through Jericho's streets. They were not like our men. They were quiet, focused, strangers. They stopped at my door. My heart jumped. I should have turned them away. I should have closed the door. I should have protected myself. But something stronger than fear touched my spirit. Felt like destiny knocking. Like a whisper from God saying, "Let them in." I opened the door. My life, my past, my shame, none of it mattered in that moment. Everything shifted. Looking back now, I know the truth. The night I welcomed those men, I was welcoming salvation. And while the city saw only a sinner, heaven was calling me something else. A vessel. A doorway. A future. People saw a sinner. God saw a future. After the night those strangers stood at my door, something inside me refused to sleep. My heart beat louder than the drums in the king's palace. My soul felt like it was standing at the edge of a cliff. I did not know why they came. I did not know what they wanted. But I knew this. Their arrival was not an accident. The next morning, Jericho woke up the same way it always did. Merchants shouted in the streets. Women carried baskets of bread. Soldiers marched along the walls. Children laughed and chased goats. But beneath the noise, fear crawled like smoke. People spoke in whispers. Nobody felt safe. Everyone knew Israel was coming. Travelers from far cities arrived with dust on their clothes and terror in their voices. They sat in the marketplace drinking water with trembling hands. And when they spoke, the whole city leaned closer. I stood at my window and listened. One man told the crowd, "I saw it with my own eyes. The God of Israel split the Red Sea. The water rose like twin mountains and the people walked through on dry ground." Another added, "Pharaoh's army followed them, but the water closed and swallowed the soldiers. They did not stand a chance." Women gasped. Men stared in disbelief. Children clung to their mothers' robes. Then someone else spoke. "They destroyed the Amorites. It was not an army that fought. It was their God." Their words filled the streets like flames. Jericho was proud, but pride began to shake. I listened from my window, my heart pounding. I had heard stories before, but this was different. These were not tales told by drunken men. These were eyewitnesses shaking with fear. Some laughed and said, "Stories always grow bigger on the road. Do not believe everything travelers say." But others answered, "No, this is real. Their God fights for them." Each day more rumors entered Jericho. Each day fear grew thicker. The priests sacrificed more animals. The soldiers trained harder. The king walked the palace halls with a dark face. But no sword can fight a miracle. And everyone knew it. There were nights when I could not sleep. I sat by my window listening to the wind. My heart whispered a question I never said aloud. What if their God is real? Not a statue. Not a carved idol. Not a dead God made of stone. A living God. A God who hears. A God who sees. A God who fights. I had never prayed to such a God. But I found myself wanting to. One evening, a group of strangers came into the city. Their clothes were torn. Their faces were pale. They carried fear inside them like a sickness. A crowd gathered. Voices rose. Whispers turned into shouts. They are close. They camp by the Jordan River. They are crossing soon. No wall can stop them. I watched the guards run to the king. Messengers rode horses through the gates. Priests beat drums and called for the people to pray to our gods. But deep inside, even the priests were afraid. Fear has a smell. You can smell it on men who pretend to be brave. Jericho smelled of fear. One night, a merchant from the city of Og came to my door asking for water. His hands trembled so much he spilled half of it. I asked him, "Why are you shaking?" He looked at me with wide eyes and whispered, "Because their God destroyed my king." Og was giant, powerful, feared by all nations. But the God of Israel crushed him like dust. He set the cup down and held his chest. I have seen armies. I have seen kings. But I have never seen a God who fights. He walked away trembling, leaving me frozen in place. That night I stood in my doorway and whispered to the darkness, "If you are real, if you truly see, then see me." I did not know if he heard me. I did not know if he cared. But something strange happened. My heart felt warm. Not safe but seen. From that night onward I was no longer afraid of Israel. I was afraid of facing a God I had ignored my whole life. Days passed. Soldiers patrolled the walls day and night. Women hid their children inside. Men sharpened their spears. But the truth hung heavy in the air. Our walls were high but they could not reach heaven. One afternoon as the sun burned hot over Jericho, a group of travelers gathered near my window. Their voices were low and hurried. One man said, "They crossed the Jordan River." Another replied, "That river was overflowing. No man could cross it." The first man shook his head. "Not men. They're God." The water stopped. Just like the Red Sea. My breath caught. My heart pounded. I knew then that the stories were not rumors. They were warnings. This God did not need gates or swords. He only needed a word. Jericho's soldiers walked with proud steps, but their eyes were scared. The king held meetings every day, but even he could not hide his fear. People prayed to our gods louder than ever, but silence was their only answer. And I stood in my window looking out at the horizon, wondering if the same God who fought for Israel could show mercy to a woman like me. The days grew heavy. The nights grew longer. Every sound in the street made people jump. Every stranger became suspicious. Jericho was a city of walls, but fear found its way through every crack. Then one evening as the sun painted the sky red, I whispered to myself, "Our walls are strong, but their God is stronger." And I knew something was coming. Something big. Something holy. Something that would change my life forever. I did not know it yet, but I was not going to be destroyed with Jericho. I was going to be saved by the very God we feared. Our walls were strong, but their God was stronger. The night it happened did not feel special at first. The streets were quiet. The lamps were dim. Most houses had closed their doors early because fear had become the new ruler of Jericho. I sat alone in my room, staring at the thin scarlet cloth I used to tie back my hair. The city outside was restless. I could feel the walls breathing with tension, like they knew something was coming. Then I heard footsteps. Soft, careful. Not like the stumbling steps of drunk men who sometimes came to my door. Not like the loud boots of soldiers. A different sound. A sound of men trying not to be heard. My heart began to pound. I stood still, not breathing, listening. Someone stopped outside my door. A whisper. Another whisper. Then a gentle knock. For a moment I could not move. I just stared at the door, frozen in place. I didn't know why, but I felt the air change in my room. Like a presence had entered before they did. Like heaven was watching. The knock came again. Quiet. Careful. I walked slowly and opened the door just enough to see their faces. Two men. Dust on their clothes, darkness in their eyes, but something else too. Focus, strength, purpose. They were not from Jericho. I knew instantly who they were. Israelites. Spies. Every story I had heard came rushing back to me. The Red Sea. The Amorites. The river that stopped. The God who fought for them. For a moment I wanted to close the door and pretend I never saw them. If the guards found them in my house, Jericho would not give me a trial. They would not ask questions. They would drag me into the street and kill me. But something strange happened in my heart. I felt no fear of them. Only a strong, quiet voice inside that whispered, "Keep them." Before I understood myself, I pulled the door open and let them inside. They stepped in quickly, their eyes scanning my room. One of them spoke in a low voice. "We need a place to hide. Just for tonight." I did not ask why. I did not ask who they were. I already knew. My mouth answered before my thoughts could catch up. "You are safe here." As soon as they sat down to rest, another sound struck the street. Shouts. the sound of sandals slapping the ground. Soldiers running. My heart jumped into my throat. The spies stood up fast. Voices outside yelled. They entered the city. 2 Israelites. Search every house. The spies looked at me, and in their eyes I saw a silent question. Will you betray us? I didn't know these men. I didn't owe them anything. If I helped them, I could die. If I turned them in, the soldiers would reward me. But in that moment, I felt the presence of the God I had whispered to in the darkness. I felt a peace that did not make sense. I looked at the spies and said firmly, "Come, follow me." My house had a flat roof where I dried stalks of flax in the sun. I led them up the narrow stairs and hid them beneath the thick bundles. Their bodies disappeared under the straw, hidden like seeds waiting to grow. Just as I closed the rooftop door, pounding shook my front door. The soldiers. They yelled my name with angry voices. I walked down slowly, forcing my breath to stay steady. I opened the door just a crack. Torches pointed at my face. Swords gleamed in the firelight. One guard shouted, "Bring out the men who came to you. We know they were here." My heart hammered so loudly I thought they would hear it. If they pushed through the door, it was over. Not just for me, but for the spies hiding above. I swallowed and answered with a calm voice I did not know I had. Yes, 2 men came to me. But I did not know they were from Israel. The soldiers pressed forward, suspicious. I pointed toward the city gate. They left when it was dark. If you hurry, you can catch them. The guards did not know that God had closed the gate hours earlier. But fear and anger blinded them. They believed me. They ran off toward the gates, shouting orders, leaving dust behind them. I closed the door slowly, my hands shaking so hard I could hardly hold the latch. I wanted to fall to my knees and cry. I wanted to scream. But I just stood there, breathing like I had run a mile. Up on the roof, the spies waited in silence. If soldiers came back, if anyone realized I lied, if one neighbor saw something, it would all be over. I leaned against the wall and whispered, "God, if you are real, this is your moment." Minutes felt like hours. The night stretched long and heavy. Finally, when the streets grew quiet and the soldiers were gone, I climbed back up to the roof. The men crawled out from the straw, dust on their clothes, sweat on their faces, but relief in their eyes. They looked at me, shocked, grateful, unsure why a woman like me risked everything. I looked at them and said the words that had been growing inside my heart for months. "I know that your God is the true God." Their eyes widened. Not in pride, but in awe. They sat with me on the roof, and for a moment we were not spies and sinner. We were just 3 souls sitting under the stars, held by the same unseen hand. But danger was not gone. The king's men would search again. They might return. They might watch my door. Every breath felt like a choice between life and death. Yet inside me there was a peace I had never known. Because for the first time in my life I was not trying to save myself. I was trusting a God I could not see. I walked them to the edge of the roof where a rope hung down the city wall. My house was built into the wall itself, high above the ground. If they climbed down, they could escape into the night. But before they left, I asked for the only thing my heart wanted. "Promise me," I said, my voice shaking. "When your God gives you this city, save me. Save my family." They nodded and answered, "Anyone in your house will live." And then they disappeared into the night, climbing down the rope, swallowed by darkness. I stood at the window holding the rope, watching the shadows until they were gone. Soldiers marched in the distance. Torches flickered. Dogs barked. The city slept in fear. And I whispered to myself, if I opened the door we would all die. But if I trusted God, maybe we would live. When the spies climbed through my window and disappeared into the night, I stood frozen in the dark, gripping the rope with trembling hands. The streets below were quiet, but I knew the silence was dangerous. Silence in a fearful city is never peace. It is a breath held before a scream. I closed the window, my fingers shaking. My heart beat so loudly it felt like the whole city could hear it. One guard saw the rope. One neighbor peeked from their window. One man remembered knocking on my door. It would all end. I leaned my forehead against the cold stone wall and whispered, "God of Israel, please hide what I cannot." For the first time in my life I prayed not to an idol, not to wood, not to stone. I prayed to a God I had never seen but somehow believed. I went back down to the main room of my house. The lamp flickered with a shaky flame as if even the fire was afraid. Outside, the city moved with anxious footsteps. Men whispered. Dogs barked. Torches flashed in the distance. Jericho was awake and Jericho was hunting. I paced the floor trying to breathe. Every sound felt like a warning. Every footstep felt like a threat. Minutes felt like hours. But just when I thought the danger had passed, I heard the worst sound possible. Fists. Smashing. Pounding. Against my door. Rahab. Open the door. The king's guards. Voices full of anger. My blood froze. My legs felt weak. My chest tightened. I thought of running. I thought of pretending I was asleep. But there was no hiding now. I walked to the door, each step heavier than the one before. I opened it only a crack, enough to see steel armor and torchlight. Their faces were hard and full of suspicion. One of them pushed forward, shouting, "Two men came here tonight. They are Israelites. Where are they?" His voice filled the room like thunder. I felt heat rush to my face. Fear swallowed my breath. I could still hear the spy's words in my mind. "If anyone knows we were here, we will die, and so will you." The guards stepped closer. Their hands were on their swords. If they forced their way inside, it was over. They would find the roof. They would find the straw. They would drag me out. They would drag the spies out. Death would come fast. I had a choice. Speak the truth, or save the men God sent to my door. Fear tried to choke me, but faith, small trembling faith, got there first. I swallowed hard and said, "His two men came." But I did not know who they were. The guards leaned in listening. My hands looked calm, but inside there was a storm. "They left just before the city gates closed," I said softly. "If you hurry, you can catch them on the road." The guards exchanged glances. Anger and confusion moved across their faces. Then one of them shouted, "To the gates! Run!" They stormed away, pushing through the streets. I heard sandals pounding against the stones. Torches shaking. Swords clattering. They believed me. They actually believed me. I closed the door slowly, gently, so it would not make a sound. Then I collapsed against it, breathing hard, my chest burning. My whole body shook. My knees felt weak. My heart would not slow down. I closed my eyes and whispered, "God, if this was wrong, forgive me. But if this was right, protect us." Because my lie was not born from evil. It was born from faith. I went to the rooftop quietly. When I lifted the straw, the spies crawled out, covered in dust, their eyes wide with fear. "They are gone," I whispered. "They went toward the gates. You are safe." But safe was not the right word. Not for them. Not for me. Not for anyone in Jericho. The city was shaking. The soldiers were hunting. My house, my roof, my life. Everything was one whisper away from death. One of the spies stepped close and said, "Why did you help us?" I looked at him, trying not to cry. I had hidden men before. But never like this. Never with my life in the balance. Never with the fate of a nation watching. I told them the truth. Not with pride. Not with clever words. Just with a trembling heart. "I know that the Lord has given you this land," I said softly. "I know your God is not like ours. Your God is real." The men exchanged looks. Not of suspicion, but of respect. At that moment, something inside me changed. I was no longer just Rahab the prostitute. I was a woman who believed. A woman who saw God not with her eyes, but with her heart. We went to the open window that faced outward over the city wall. Below was a steep drop, rocks and shadows waiting. I tied the same rope around a thick beam and threw it out into the night. "Climb down," I whispered. "But listen to me. Go to the mountains. If you take the road, the soldiers will find you. Hide there for 3 days. When the search ends, you will be safe." They listened. They trusted me. A woman everyone else despised became the one they relied on. Before leaving, they took my hands and made a promise. "Bring your family into this house. Mark your window with a scarlet cord. When God gives us this city, you will live." A scarlet cord. A simple rope. But to me it felt holy. Felt like mercy. It felt like a bridge between my past and my future. The spies climbed down the wall and disappeared into the dark, just as the first edge of morning touched the sky. I stood at the window and watched the light grow. The city began to wake. Merchants opened shops. Children ran through the streets. Soldiers returned from their useless chase. Nobody knew how close death had come to my doorway. Nobody knew how close God had come to my soul. I went downstairs, sat on the floor, and let the tears come. Not tears of fear. Tears of relief. Tears of hope. I whispered into the quiet room, Lord, I do not know your laws. I do not know your prayers. But I know your power. Protect me and I will follow you. For the first time, peace filled my heart. People would say I lied. Maybe they were right. But lies born of fear destroy lives. My lie saved lives. My lie was for a reason. After the soldiers were gone and the spies stood on my roof breathing in the cold night air, there was a silence between us that felt holy. Not empty. Not awkward. Just full of something none of us could see but all of us could feel. The spies brushed dust from their clothes and looked at me with eyes I had never seen in any man before. Not hunger. Not desire. Not disgust. Respect. Almost gratitude. One of them whispered, "You risked your life tonight. Why?" I could have said many things. I could have told them I had nothing to lose. I could have cried about my shame, my loneliness, my broken past. But the real reason was deeper. Stronger. I looked at them with shaking lips and spoke words my heart had been holding for months. I know that the Lord has given you this land. Their eyes widened in surprise. I continued, voice trembling but steady. I know the terror of you has fallen on all of us. We have heard of your God, how he dried the Red Sea, how he crushed the Amorites, how he fights for you. Our hearts melted when we heard. The courage of our men died inside them. Tears rose in my eyes as I whispered the truth that lived like fire in my chest. Your God. He is God in heaven above and on earth beneath. The words left my mouth like a confession and a prayer. I had never said the name of their God before. But when the words passed my lips, I felt something break inside me. Chains I could not see. Shame I could not erase. It fell away like dust. For the first time in my life I was speaking to the true God. The spies stood silent. They had not expected this from a woman like me. A woman of the streets. A woman covered in the dirt of sin. But God does not measure hearts the way people do. My voice shook as I spoke again. I showed you mercy tonight. So now I beg you, show mercy to me. Save my father, my mother, my brothers, my sisters. I ask for their lives. The request was bold. No one in Jericho would have cared if I died. No one would have saved a woman like me. But I believed these men served a God who protected those who believed in him. The spies stepped closer and one of them spoke with a steady voice. You saved our lives. So we will save yours. But there was a condition. Bring your family into this house. When we come to take this city, anyone inside your house will live. Anyone outside will die. I nodded quickly, tears burning my eyes. Then the other spy pulled something from his cloak. A long red cord. A simple rope. But the color struck me like lightning. Red. Like blood. Like covenant. He placed it in my hand and said, "Tie this scarlet cord in your window. When our army comes, it will be the sign. The soldiers will see it and they will pass over your home." Passover. The word sounded familiar. Like a story I heard once from a traveler. About a night in Egypt, where blood on doors saved the innocent. I held the cord against my heart. Rough. Stained. Strong. Just like me. The men moved toward the window to climb down the rope, but I stopped them for a moment. What if someone tells the king? What if the soldiers come back? The spy whispered, "If you tell anyone we were here, we cannot protect you. But if you remain silent, your life will not end with Jericho." He said it gently, not as a threat, as a promise. I nodded. I would not speak a single word. Not to my friends. Not to my neighbors. Not even to my family until the time was right. We walked to the edge of the roof. The rope hung down the wall like a lifeline. The spies gripped it and began their silent descent. Before the last man climbed down, he looked back at me and said, "Have faith, Rahab. The God you believe in does not forget." Then he vanished into the night. I stood at the window long after they were gone. The moon cast a silver light on the rope as it swayed gently in the wind. The city was still. But inside my heart the world was changing. As the first light of dawn touched the horizon, I took the scarlet cord in my hands. My fingers shook. My breath trembled. Because this was not just rope. It was a promise. A covenant. A lifeline between my house and heaven. I tied it tightly across my window. Not like decoration. Like destiny. The red flashed bright against the stone. Some would see it as nothing. Some would ignore it. Some would mock it. But heaven would see it. And heaven never misses a sign. When the cord was secure, I stepped back and stared at it with tears in my eyes. This was the first time anything in my home felt holy. I sat on the floor and waited for fear to return, but it didn't. Instead, peace settled over me like a warm blanket. For the first time, I believed my story was not ending. It was beginning. The world saw Rahab the prostitute. But God saw Rahab the believer. Rahab the rescuer. Rahab the woman who trusted him without ever seeing his face. I pressed my hand against the window and whispered, "Lord, keep your promise and I will keep mine." Days would come when the city trembled. Nights would come when death walked the streets. People would scream. Walls would shake. But my window would shine red with mercy. That scarlet cord was more than thread. It was faith. It was covenant. It was my way out of the darkness I had lived in for so long. I tied the cord, and with it I tied my life to God. After I tied the scarlet cord to my window, I stood there for a long time holding the stone frame with both hands. The red rope waved in the wind like a banner of blood and promise. It was small, simple, nothing special to the eyes of men. But to me it was everything. It was my only hope. The sky grew dark and torches lit the streets. Men armed themselves. Women hid their children. The entire city of Jericho could feel something coming. I could feel it too. Jericho was a proud city with giant walls and trained soldiers. But fear had already broken us before any army arrived. People whispered in the marketplace. They say Israel is camped at the Jordan. They say their God dried the waters. They say we are next. And I would go back to my window and look at the scarlet rope. My heart shook, but my faith whispered, God will keep his word. For the first time since I was a child, I believed in something greater than myself. Not in money. Not in my beauty. Not in the men who used me and threw me away. But in a God who heard a woman's cry through stone walls. Days passed and the fear grew stronger. The king ordered every gate to be guarded day and night. Soldiers marched across the walls like restless lions. Priests burned incense to silent idols. The smell of sacrifice filled the city. I watched from my window as families cried, as men sharpened weapons, as the city tried to be strong. But I knew something they did not. Strength does not come from walls. Strength comes from God. Every morning I woke up and checked the scarlet rope. Every night I touched it before I slept. Then one afternoon a group of women walked by and saw the red cord. They stopped and stared. One of them pointed and said loudly, "What is that rope? Why is it hanging there?" Another laughed. "Maybe Rahab thinks a piece of string will save her." They all laughed together, covering their mouths as if my faith was a joke. I stood behind the window and watched them. Their words were sharp, but I did not pull the cord down. I did not defend myself. Let them laugh. Let them mock. Because I would rather be mocked by people and saved by God than praised by people and destroyed with them. As the sun set that night, sounds of warning reached the city. A trumpet. A shout. A whisper of panic. They are close. They are marching. They crossed the river. The fear became a storm. Men ran through the streets shouting orders. Children cried. Doors slammed shut. Jericho prepared for war. I gathered my family quietly. My father. My mother. My brothers. My sisters. They all came to my house, confused and afraid. My father asked, "Rahab, why are we here?" My mother whispered, "Everyone else hides inside the city. Why do you keep us here in this house?" I looked at all of them, tears burning my eyes, and said simple words they could not understand yet. Because God is coming. Stay inside. Do not leave. They looked at me like I had lost my mind. But I held on to the scarlet cord and refused to fear. Night fell. The city fell into a heavy silence. A silence so thick it felt like the air stopped moving. We waited. I stood at the window and looked out. The soldiers walked the wall with torches, shouting into the dark. Hours passed. My legs ached. My heart pounded. My hands shook. I wondered if the spies made it safely. I wondered if they remembered their promise. I wondered if God remembered me. Every sound made my heart jump. Every shadow made me hold my breath. My mother touched my shoulder softly and said, "Child, come rest." But I could not rest. I could not sleep. I could not close my eyes. Because this was the longest night of my life. Somewhere beyond the walls, the army of God was coming. Somewhere in the darkness, footsteps of promise were marching. And I, Rahab, the woman no one thought God could use, was waiting for heaven to rescue me. People passed my house during the night and laughed at the rope. Scarlet thread. What foolishness. Does she expect magic? She will die with the rest of us. Their voices cut like knives. But I did not remove the rope. I did not answer them. My faith was louder than their insults. Hours turned into more hours. The city grew colder. The moon moved slowly across the sky. My family slept on the floor, trembling. But I stood holding the rope with both hands, whispering to the God of Israel, "Remember me. Please, remember me." At dawn a sound shook the air. A deep, loud trumpet, echoing across the valley. Jericho woke with screams. Soldiers ran. Children cried. Women prayed to silent idols. My heart pounded. My breath escaped my lungs. Because the night was over. And the battle had begun. And in that moment I felt something stronger than fear. Stronger than doubt. Stronger than death. Faith. Not faith in walls. Not faith in swords. Not faith in my old gods. Faith in the God who had heard my voice in the darkness. The day was coming when these walls would fall. When Jericho would shake. When death would walk through the streets. But I knew, as long as that scarlet rope hung in my window, God would keep his promise. The longest night did not break me. It built me. It made my faith unshakable. I waited not on the soldiers but on God. Morning came with a strange silence. No birds. No voices. No footsteps. Just a thick, heavy quietness that sat over Jericho like a dark cloud. I stood at my window holding the scarlet rope with trembling hands. My family sat inside the room whispering prayers they did not know how to pray. Fear lived in the walls. Fear lived in our breaths. Then we heard it. A sound like nothing we had ever heard before. Deep, slow footsteps. Hundreds of them. Marching. Moving. Drawing closer. My father rushed to the window and gasped. "They are here." We all looked out. The army of Israel walked toward Jericho in perfect lines. No shouting. No running. No horses. Just silent soldiers moving like a river of strength. Priests walked in front of them, carrying trumpets and something golden, the Ark of the Covenant. Even from a distance I could feel something holy around it. Something powerful. Something alive. The people of Jericho climbed the walls to watch. Some shouted insults. Some spat. Some laughed nervously. But beneath the noise, fear shook every voice. Israel reached the walls. And they did not attack. No swords raised. No arrows shot. No ladders. No fire. They only walked around the city. One time. Silently. The soldiers of Jericho shouted, "What kind of battle is this? Are they afraid? Are they fools?" But I saw something the others did not. The soldiers of Israel were not afraid. They marched with eyes full of calm fire. They marched like men who already knew victory. Every day the same thing happened. The warriors marched. The priests blew trumpets. The ark shone in the sun. And Israel went home. Jericho grew confused. Then angry. Then terrified. On the seventh day something changed. The footsteps came earlier. Heavier. Faster. When I looked out, my heart almost stopped. Israel was marching again, but not once. Not twice. Again and again and again. 7 times they circled the city. The ground trembled. The trumpets cried out like thunder. Inside my house we held hands and prayed. My body shook from head to toe. My breath came in gasps. Then the world froze. The soldiers of Israel stopped walking. The trumpets went silent. The whole city held its breath. Then a single sound cut the sky. A long, loud trumpet blast. A sound that seemed to slice the heavens open. And then a shout. Not one man. Not 10. Not 100. Thousands. A shout so powerful the earth quaked beneath my feet. A shout so loud the stones shook in the walls. A shout that sounded like the voice of God himself. And then it happened. The walls of Jericho exploded. Stones flew like birds. Dust filled the sky. Screams tore through the city. The ground roared and buildings crumbled like sand. Our mighty city, the one everyone thought could never fall, was breaking like glass. My family screamed and covered their ears. The floor shook. Oil jars fell and shattered. Dust filled our lungs. We waited for the roof to fall on us. We waited to die. But we did not. When the dust cleared enough to see through the window, I gasped. The entire wall on both sides of my house was gone. Jericho was in ruins. People were buried in stone. Smoke and broken wood filled the streets. But my house, the one built into the wall, still stood. Not one stone cracked. Not one beam fell. The scarlet rope hung bright and untouched. Everything around us collapsed. But God held my house like a mother holds her child. Then through the dust I saw them, the same 2 spies. They ran straight toward my door. No hesitation. No fear. They were not looking for treasure. They were not looking for soldiers. They were looking for me. They shouted, "Bring your family out. All of you." My father carried my mother. My brothers helped the children. We hurried through the broken streets. Around us destruction screamed, but our path was clear. Not one stone touched our feet. Not one soldier harmed us. The spies surrounded us like a shield and guided us out of the burning city. Israelite soldiers parted to make way for us. Some stared in shock. A woman like me, a woman with a past, walking out of judgment untouched. When we reached the safe place outside the camp, I turned and looked back. Jericho was gone. Smoke rose into the sky. Cries faded into silence. The city that trusted in walls was destroyed. The woman who trusted in God was saved. Tears streamed down my face. My knees hit the ground. I lifted my hands and whispered, "Thank you for remembering me." I had no title, no good reputation, no clean history. I had faith, and God saw it. Everything around me fell. But God held my house up. When Jericho fell silent, we stood outside the city gates with dust on our skin and shock in our hearts. Everything we had ever known was gone. Our home, our neighbors, our past, all buried under broken stones. But we were not alone. Israel surrounded us. Not with swords. Not with anger. With protection. Men stood guard around my family like a wall of living safety. Some watched the horizon for danger. Some searched the ruins for survivors. And a few looked at me with eyes full of something I had never seen before. Respect. The same soldiers who once marched in war now carried children in their arms, offering water, bread, safety. They treated us not as enemies but as precious lives. And as I stood there breathing air that tasted like smoke and freedom, I knew something quietly beautiful. I would never return to the life I once lived. My house was gone. My city was gone. But so was my shame. God had pulled me out of my past as gently as a father rescues a child from a burning home. Israel took us to a safe place near their camp. Women brought us clean clothes, warm blankets, fresh food. My mother cried when she was handed bread. My father bowed his head in silence. My brothers stared in disbelief. No one insulted us. No one mocked us. No one called me by the name Jericho gave me. They called me Rahab, just Rahab. As if I was a woman with dignity. As if I belonged among them. For the first time in my life I felt clean without washing. Days turned into weeks. Israel rebuilt their camp, prepared for their next battles, and we stayed close, learning their ways, their laws, their worship. At night I listened to them sing psalms under the stars. Their voices rose like wings, full of joy, full of faith. Sometimes I cried quietly in the dark. Not because I was sad. Because I finally felt safe. One evening, as the sun melted into the horizon, I stepped outside the tent to breathe the cool air. That was when I first saw him. Simon. A strong man with a gentle voice. A soldier, but his eyes were softer than any I had ever known. He walked toward me slowly, not staring, not judging, only watching with quiet curiosity. "You are Rahab?" he asked. "Yes," I whispered. "I was there the night the walls fell," he said. "I saw your house still standing. I knew God's hand was on you." No one had ever spoken to me like that. People used to talk about me with disgust or false interest or hidden hunger. But this man spoke to me with honor. The next days he found reasons to speak with me again. Sometimes he brought water. Sometimes food. Sometimes nothing at all, just his presence. He asked about my family, not my past. He asked how I survived the fear, not how I earned money. He asked about my faith, not my shame. Once I asked him, "Why do you speak to me?" He smiled a little. "Because I saw your courage. I saw your faith. And I think God has written something special over your life." No man had ever looked at me with respect. Not one. In Jericho, men used my body. In Israel, a man saw my heart. Time passed and my family began to build new homes among the Israelites. We learned their songs, their laws, their prayers. On the day we stood with them to worship, my heart beat like a drum. I had worshipped idols once, empty gods made of wood and stone. But this time I lifted my hands to the God who parted seas. To the God who brought down walls. To the God who remembered a woman everyone forgot. I felt his presence wrap around me like warm linen. That night, Salmon asked to speak with my father. I did not know why, but my heart trembled. When he returned, he looked at me with gentle certainty. "Rahab, will you be my wife?" For a moment the world stopped. "Marry me?" A woman with a past stained by sin? A woman with a reputation no one could wash away? Tears filled my eyes. I covered my face with shaking hands. "Why me?" I whispered. His answer was simple. "Because God redeemed you. And if God calls you pure, who can call you unclean?" My voice broke into 1,000 pieces. I said yes. For the first time someone wanted me, not for my body but for my soul. Life changed after that. I woke every morning with a husband who loved me. A home filled with peace. A heart full of hope. People in Israel did not whisper when I passed. They did not point at me. They did not roll their eyes. They smiled. They greeted me with warmth. They treated me like a woman with worth. The girl who once sold herself for a handful of coins was now a wife of honor, married into the tribe of Judah. One evening, Salmon held my hand as we sat watching the stars. His voice was soft. "Rahab, one day the world will remember you. Not for your sin, but for your faith." I rested my head on his shoulder and closed my eyes. God had taken a broken woman and given her a new name, a new life, a new destiny. For the first time someone saw my soul, not my sin. Years passed and my life changed in ways I never dreamed possible. I was no longer the woman people whispered about. No longer the shame of Jericho. No longer the shadow in the corner of a broken city. I was a wife. A mother. A woman who walked with her head lifted high, not because I was perfect, but because God had washed my story clean. When my son was born, I held him against my chest and cried again, not tears of shame but tears of joy. His skin was soft. His fingers wrapped around mine like tiny promises. His cry filled the room like music. We named him Boaz. Every time I said his name, my heart felt warm. Boaz. A child born from grace. A child born into a family I never believed I could have. I watched him grow and I saw kindness in his eyes, the same kindness his father showed me. He was strong but gentle. Brave but tender. A young man who saw people with mercy, not judgment. Sometimes when he helped strangers or fed the poor, people whispered, "Where did a boy like that come from?" I smiled in silence because I knew. He came from the God who does not judge a person by their past, but by his purpose. Boaz grew into a man of noble character. He became respected in Israel, known for fairness, generosity, and honor. People trusted him. People loved him. And one day he met a woman named Ruth, Another stranger, another outsider, another woman society tried to overlook. But Boaz saw her heart, just as Salmon once saw mine. He married her, and together they had a son named Obed. Obed had a son named Jesse. Jesse had a son named David. David, the great king of Israel. The shepherd boy who killed giants. The man after God's own heart. And through David's descendants came Jesus, the Savior of the world. Sometimes I sit in silence and let that truth wash over me like warm oil. A prostitute from a fallen city became part of the royal bloodline of the Messiah. A woman people called filthy became a grandmother in the story of salvation. A name once covered in shame is now spoken with honor in the house of God. God did not just forgive me, He wrote me into His plan. People used to say that my house stood on the wall of Jericho. Now they say my name is carved in the foundation of God's story. I look back at where I came from. Dusty room. A stained reputation. Nights filled with regret. Days filled with sorrow. Yet God stepped into that darkness and lit a flame that has burned for generations. The world saw my sin. God saw my heart. The world saw my past. God saw my future. When I tied that scarlet rope to my window, I did not know it was a symbol of grace. A symbol of redemption. A symbol of blood that would one day save the world. Now I understand. That rope was not just for my safety. It was heaven's signature on my life. Told the world, this one belongs to me. I am Rahab. Not Rahab the prostitute. Rahab the redeemed. Rahab the chosen. Rahab the ancestor of kings. If God can turn my story into glory, He can turn yours too. I began as Rahab the prostitute. But heaven wrote my name into the story of the Messiah. God chose me, and He can choose you too. If this story touched your heart, please click like. If you learned something new about Rahab, tap subscribe. And before you go, tell me in the comments, which Bible character do you want to hear from next? Was it Esther, Ruth, Hannah, or someone almost forgotten like Jephthah's daughter or the woman at the well? Let me know. Your choice might be the next story.